Have you ever thought about your last and final words? I mean, have you ever thought about the words that you're going to be most known for? I just kind of went online and typed in last and final words, and a couple of them here struck me. The first one was Todd Beamer. You might remember Todd Beamer was Flight 93 on 9/11. And his famous words were, "Let's roll." Think of Bob Marley, who said, of all things, a guy that had money coming out his ears, money can't buy life. You've got George Harrison of the Beatles. Of course, this kind of sounds like a Beatle, doesn't it? Love one another. And then Winston Churchill, very Churchill-like. His last words were, "I'm bored with it all." I don't know what my last words will be. I suppose it's the reason why I'm drawn to this text today out of 2 Samuel and 1 Kings to talk about and think about David's last and final words, particularly to his son, Solomon. I'm going to consider the things that he said, and we're also going to consider the things that he didn't say. And we've had transition in our lives, as some of you know. We've had tragedy recently. We've had great days. We've had change. And as I think about my mortality, and as I think about and not just think here with my mind, but absorb the significance of our mortality. These words in the text struck me. And I kept coming back, and I kept reading, and I kept thinking, and I kept praying, and then so much was going on, and this never happens, but it wasn't until yesterday did I formulate anything of structure. And let me read them to you, because it's going to make sense to you as you read these words of David. As we consider his last and final words to his son Solomon, I think you're going to understand some of the things that I'm feeling. 2 Samuel 23, and it says this. Now these are the last words of David. The oracle of David, the son of Jesse. The oracle of the man who was raised on high, the anointed of the God of Jacob, the sweet psalmist of Israel. The Spirit of the Lord speaks by me. His word is on my tongue. The God of Israel has spoken. The rock of Israel has said to me, when one rules justly over men, ruling in the fear of God, he dawns on them like a morning light. Like the sun shining forth on a cloudless morning. Like rain that makes grass to sprout from the earth. For does not my house stand so with God? For he has made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things and secure. For he will not cause to prosper all my help and my desire. But worthless men are like thorns that are thrown away, for they cannot be taken by hand. But the one who touches them arms himself with iron and the shaft of a spear. They are utterly consumed with fire. And skipping over a couple pages to 1 Kings 2, when David's time to die drew near, he commanded Solomon his son, and he said these words, I am about to go the way of all the earth. Be strong and show yourself a man. and keep the charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes and his commands and his rules, his testimonies, and as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do and whatever you turn, that the Lord may establish his word that he spoke concerning me, saying, if your son pays close attention to their ways, to walk before me in faithfulness with all your heart and with all their soul, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. Then David died, and he went with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. And the time that David reigned over Israel was 40 years, and he reigned 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem. And so Solomon sat on the throne of David, his father. His kingdom was firmly established. There's 4 things I want us to consider. Number 1 is, why are his words, why do they matter? What is so significant about David? What is it that he accomplished, and who was he? And the first thing that you can see, and I think I threw a map up here, I don't know if it's there or not, but you can see, I don't know from your vantage point if you can see this or not, but you see the territory of Israel before David the king, and then you see the second area, that darker area, where that it was the place where that conquered by David but inherited by Solomon. But then if you notice, there really isn't much more after David. I mean, you can see some economic influence there to the north, up towards Syria, what we would call Syria today. But generally speaking, David, everything he touched turned to gold. Jerusalem was called the city of David for a reason. He moved it from Hebron to Jerusalem, and he saw that as the holy city. You see all the things that he accomplished. Politically speaking, he was the king that brought all the tribes together, never to happen again under anybody. So you have this political genius, this man who was able to influence people in ways that no one had ever influenced. And then you think about his military experience. Remember the days we talked about this, is that Saul was confused and irritated and maybe even jealous when someone say, Saul has killed thousands in the name of God, but David has killed tens of thousands. So militarily, politically. But then usually if you have someone who is successful in those areas of life, they typically aren't in the arts, but not with David. He wrote volumes. In fact, there's tens of thousands of volumes written on his volumes. He was a man's man. And yes, he had hiccups. And yes, there are things in his life that we could point to, but as a whole, he was a man after God's own heart for a reason. So why do his words matter so much? David had strong opinion on what it means to be a man or an adult, as one who is going to sacrificially follow after God. The text for the next few minutes, no matter whether you are one who is at the end of your life or you're in the middle, kind of in that sandwich where you kind of still got the kiddos and you're trying to kind of still care for, keep your eyes open for mom and dad, or if you're younger or a teenager. I found these words to be penetrating to my heart. And there's 2 things that David says in this text that are worth noting. Number 1, or the second point, and the first piece of advice to Solomon he gives is that you need to worship God. You look in there, it says, keep the charge of the Lord your God. That was the instruction that he gave. And that's found in only in 3 places in the Old Testament. So whatever you do, he says, don't neglect worship. Keep worship of God front and center in your life. Attend to your spiritual needs. And then he says, and tend to the spiritual needs of those that you are over. And so to Solomon, he's saying, I want you to tend to the spiritual needs of all of the kingdom. And the quick application as I see in that is no matter who you are and no matter where you are in your life, we're all responsible for influencing someone in their worship and their walk with Jesus. Whether we are a missionary or a pastor, or whether we are a teacher, or whether we are a priest, whether a parent, his advice to Solomon is tend to your heart and do all that you can to influence others in that direction. You see, David loved God. He was passionate to demonstrate it and show it. In fact, isn't it his one wife, Michal? She was embarrassed by how he was dancing around, and just reminds me of me in the kitchen every morning. And of all the things, of all the advice, of all the valuable pieces of boiling down one's life that he needed to communicate to his son, the first was worship God. And it struck me because of all the things that he accomplished, and all the things that he was known for, and all the success that he saw in his life, the first of the 2 important things that he wanted for his son is to worship God. Some of you know our son is a youth pastor. I tried to talk him out of it. He didn't listen. He's on his own. And my advice to him is not a career move or to be a youth pastor. The advice that we were to give to our kids, I try desperately to not allow it to be regarding things and stuff and titles. Not always successful. Certain things are important, and they kind of creep up and they go a little high. And I'm reminded today is to get a perspective. As a father of kiddos in their 20s and 2 married, my influence seemingly is less and less. I think so. I mean, at times it's there. I get that. I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm just saying it's just less influence, less time. But couldn't be much different than David with Solomon. And I love the fact that Solomon was his boy, his son, and he brought him in, and he goes, I need you to get this. You may not have seen it, you may not have watched it completely, but you need to know. Worship God. By the way, I don't know your view and understanding of worship. Jeremy's worship today was one that touched my heart. I like the big sound, and I like the full band, and boy, we'd do smoke if we were allowed. Fire alarms always go off. So I don't mind those things. But there's something about just one person worshiping Jesus and inviting us to join in. And so when David refers to worship, he's not referring to corporate worship, although I'm sure that took place, and that's important, and I don't want to minimize that. I make a living doing it, so I need to be careful what I say. But I'll tell you what's more important. It's personal worship. And the day that we realized that we wanted to hire AJ as our youth pastor is when at Elevate Coffee, he explained to me that how important his personal worship, daily personal worship of Jesus is in his heart and his life. And at that moment, I realized I want our students to get that, and I hope it's contagious. That's what David's saying to Solomon. I had a dad call me recently. Churches long ago, and we didn't lose touch, but we don't see each other often, and he never calls. And I go, man, what's going on? He goes, well, my son, his first girlfriend, dating this girl, and they are wanting to go and start making some weekend trips to the coast and have some sleepovers. I said, okay, I hear you. And he goes, and you know me as an Italian New Yorker, I want to kill somebody. His ties to the mob are not clear, but I think that. And I said, I know what's right, and you know what's right. I know your heart. You know your heart. And I started talking to him about what hurt his heart. And I started talking to him about what his heart longs for his son. And I started trying to put into words for him some thinking and thoughts that were raw. And because we're maybe a little ahead in some areas, maybe it was a little bit easier for me. And as I started talking, I said, you just long deeply for your kids to know and love Jesus and to walk with him and to know him and to honor him and to honor him with their lives. And I said, and it hurts when that's not the direction they're taking. And he goes, it hurts so bad. I said, I know. Tell him that. I don't know what he said, something like, you mean don't kill him, or something like that. And I said, tell him that. A couple days goes by, and I think it was Friday, I got a text back, and he goes, the conversation could not have gone better. Thank you, can't wait to share it with you. It's what I'm picturing as David is pouring out his heart to Solomon, and as he's saying, what really is important. And I look at 1 Kings chapter 2. He says, I'm about to go all the way to the earth. Be strong, show yourself as a man, keep charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes and his commandments and his rules and his testimonies as it was written in the law of Moses. The law of Moses, the Torah, the first 5 books of the scriptures. Which leads me to point 3. It says the second piece of advice is, the first is to worship your God. And the second is keep the law. And as Judy and I had this conversation even this morning while laying in bed, as I often do, talk through the message. She said, and she was right. She goes, it's hard to say the words keep the law without people thinking just do the right thing. Or just follow the 10 Commandments. And she said, I wish at times it was that easy. And I wish that I could you give me a list, which is exactly what happened in Israel. They had, 790, I think, laws that they had, man-made laws that they had created. Because sometimes it's just easier. Give me the list. Give me a list of things to do, and I will check those off. But that's not what's happening here. As David is pleading with his son Solomon, as you take the throne, as you lead the kingdom, worship God, but know the law, know his word, know his precepts, be familiar with and write them on your heart, and stay close to his longing and desire for your life. Study the law. Know the law. In fact, he says the benefit of it, that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn, that the Lord may establish his word that he spoke concerning me, saying, if your son pays close attention to their ways, to walk before me in faithfulness with all of their hearts and with all of their soul, you shall not lack a man on the throne of God. He's saying, literally, keep close attention to the things of God. We often have this perspective that the relationship that God had with folks in the Old Testament is so different than the relationship that folks have today. In reality, if you look at these words, of all the things that David could have said to Solomon, he said, worship God and stay close to his precepts. Folks, how does that differ today? And if there's anyone that understands what it's like to follow his lust and regret it, if there's anyone that understands hatred and murder, he knew it. If there was anyone that understood the mistake and the rebellion that was required to live a life of just self-gratification, it's David. I'll give you that. But he's also the man who knows and knew so well what it was like to refrain from killing the man who tried to kill him 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and said, I don't want to get in front of God. It was the man who would just pour out his heart in psalm and sing and worship and knew God with all of his heart deeply. And at the end of his long, wildly successful life, his advice, worship God, follow him. Last point is the reward is invaluable. 1 Kings 2 and verse 3, it says that you may prosper in all that you do. And then verse 10, your kingdom will be established. I will tell you that I wish with all of my heart that there was an easier way to connect with God and to please him than to worship him and obey him. It sounds so easy on the outside, but it requires my heart. And we'll check off the things that we believe that we need to do. And I'll check off the things that I preach and teach. Meanwhile, you know what God says? I need your heart. It's a message that I could preach to myself every day, and it wouldn't get old. And as your pastor, I know that we offer ministries and small groups and children's ministry and worship and tech, and we're sending people downtown, and we're sending people to Mexico, and we're hearing those stories. And I understand all of those, and they're all such good things, but you can walk and literally sign up for them all, and literally pull out your wallet and write a check for everyone to go. And you can have all of the t-shirts, all ironed and pressed in your closet from every mission trip and every event and every VBS and everything that you do. And at the end of the day, David's words to Solomon have to resonate in our hearts. And he says, if you know him and you worship him and you walk with him, here's the kicker. The kingdom, whoever your kingdom is, your family, church, small group, your classroom, those you work with, it would be like the sun, what the text says, in his poetic way, it's like the sun peeking through a cloudless day. I'm from Cleveland. I know cloudless days. And it's like in January, and you're there, and it's dark and dreary and miserable, and it's just, you dream of July where you can enjoy 4 days of summer. And God says, you have the power, if you worship me and obey me and walk with me, those that are under you, those that you're responsible for, those that you're going to influence, those that are going to come into your world, it's going to be like sun shining through on a cloudless day. Do you want that? Yeah, so do I. Let me pray for you. God, never, ever in the history of Israel, the church, has there been a man that is such a greater figure. There has never been one who lived his life to the fullest, whether it's negative or positive, God, whether it was all in or all out at the moment. There has never been one that lived his life so large. And so when his words to his son are penned, I take special notice. And today I hear him. Worship and follow. That's my commitment. And God, I may change my mind tomorrow. I may change my mind today, but God, I pray that you would just constantly bring me back every single day, and let us not as a church lose sight of pointing people to Jesus. And may we worship him, know him, and follow him. In Jesus' name.